What is up, everybody? Welcome to episode 37 of the True Crime Podcast, Murder with My Mother, where I talk murder with my mother, who is sitting beside me.
Woo!
You can see. So for all of you guys who have been listening to us for the last almost 2 years.
Yeah, it'll be 2 years in October.
Holy shit. This is what I look like, Danica, the mother. Or I'm not the mother. I'm other people's mother, but I'm not her mother. She is my mother.
Well, you are my mother in some ways.
True.
You're definitely a little more appropriate than me, and
True.
yeah, so
Yeah.
whatever.
So here we are. We told you guys we had some pretty exciting things coming. So this is it. Hopefully you're not all let down, because this is pretty exciting.
It's like a date from Tinder. Like, what the fuck? That's what you actually look like? That's what always happens to me anyway.
Yeah, this is us. So Brent, if you're out there, which we know you are,
Brent BLB.
yeah.
Michelle, if you're still listening, now that you have your new life on the island.
Yeah, hopefully you didn't forget about us.
But we're live, bitches.
Yes, we are live. And so today we are obviously going to dive into another true crime case, which we know you guys are all tuned in for. But before we get into that, obviously we have some social media to let you guys know about. We have our Patreon, which we hope, if you guys love us, go and support us on Patreon. So it's Murder with My Mother podcast. We have TikTok, which we fucking suck at because I'm 30, as you guys know, remember?
And I'm 29 perpetually, but I still don't know how to use TikTok, but I'm going to fucking learn it. That's my goal for 2022.
There you go. That's a pretty good goal.
Yeah.
It's like
I still can't use Snapchat, but maybe TikTok will be easier.
Yeah, TikTok is not. I literally made a reel and it took me 3 hours. And Kears has to tell everybody that. He's like, my mom tried to make a video and it took her 3 hours. I'm like, oh, fuck.
Well, it's a good thing his grandmother didn't make it. Still be working on it.
So, we got to give a quick shout out to our sponsors, Fursense, the dog dry shampoo. Always supporting Murder with My Mother.
And I just want to say, as a sidebar to Fursense, that if you have a quick date and your hair's a little greasy and you didn't have time to go to the drugstore, you know where I'm going. You know where I'm going.
Yes.
Well, hair takes a long time to dry, but if you
This
put
is
some
true.
Fursense in,
Yeah, no, you're
I
right.
didn't have any allergic reactions, smelled like lavender.
Perfect. That is one of the popular scents. Yeah. So, another thing is, you guys can see us now, so I can't be like, the baby is not with us. Obviously, she stayed at home with her dad, so you won't hear
So there'll be
her
no
little
breastfeeding
coos.
in this episode?
No, which usually I am totally doing.
If that's
you
why you
guys can't
tuned
see
in,
me.
you'll be let down.
In case you thought it was Murder with My Mother and Murder with a Breastfeeding Mother, it's not. That's not this episode. So, yeah.
Maybe next time.
Yeah.
If our viewership doesn't go up.
Yeah, then we'll be on OnlyFans.
Yeah.
Nanatoes.
Yes.
And I'll just let you, support
Take
me
over
with your toes.
Yeah.
So, on the true crime front, locally, nothing new to report, really. Trina Hunt, there's been no movement with that.
Apparently, the suspect, who we all know, has been seen vacationing around and stuff like that. So,
Yeah. Just
his
same
life
old,
hasn't.
same old.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really terrible, but that's the way it goes sometimes.
Yep. Naomi Onatera, we haven't heard anything of Reggie. What is his name? Ovi? Reggie?
Yeah, I think he is still in prison. He didn't get bail, so that was good.
Yep. Another thing domestically kind of related, obviously, that we covered, Gabby Petito. So Brian Laundrie, as we know, committed suicide, and they actually found a book, which I think we said that in probably 4 or 5 episodes ago.
I don't even remember.
Anyway, they found a book. Basically, it was his, suicide note. And now you guys are going to see how much I talk with my hands, so that's exciting. But yeah, so they published his book. They ended up publishing it, and basically in there he goes and says that Gabby had fallen when they were going through a creek. She hit her head so bad, it kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger, which on her autopsy, it does note that she had blunt force trauma, and that's not how she died, though. So apparently he tried to keep her alive, helped her. This is all according to Brian Laundrie, so who knows. But he says that basically he didn't want to watch her suffer anymore, put her out of her misery, and strangled her. Yeah, so
Well, I don't know why you wouldn't just drive her to a hospital.
Well, apparently they were very, very far away.
Well,
you know,
fuck, if she dies on the way to the hospital, at least you have the cred of saying, like, I was on the way to the hospital when she died.
Yeah. And that's just
I mean, we can't even prove whether he did that or whether he didn't do that, but that sounds a little sus to me.
It does sound a little sus. Obviously, again, we won't know because he took all of that. He wrote it down and told us his side of the story.
Yeah, because that's
how
his
credible
legacy.
Is that?
Gabby doesn't have a legacy because she's dead. So
exactly. So,
anywho,
yeah,
I guess it's irrelevant. Hopefully, she didn't suffer and she went quickly. And I mean, it sucks because she was a young life that was lost too early, and he took it from her.
Exactly. But kind of segueing into our episode today, another case the case that we're going to cover today actually is kind of like a mystery. It's probably one of the more mysterious cases that we've done because the killer is never apprehended. We will talk about the killer, but he's never brought to justice. There's no trial, and you guys will see why. It's kind of a unfinished sorts, you know? I mean, what do you think? It's kind of...
I think it's definitely unfinished for the families of the victims.
Yeah.
And I think, as you'll see, there is a lot of frustrating stuff in here.
There is.
So without further ado...
we will hop right into episode 37, and you guys can see us now. So
hey, y'all.
It was July 1993 in Indianapolis. Okay.
So Danica has a problem saying Indianapolis, and she wants to call it Indianapolis.
No, I don't. I just thought, I always thought it was like a metropolis of Indiana, but it's actually a place called Indianapolis.
Indianapolis, dumbass.
Well, fuck. You raised me. Which is in Indiana. So for those of you who are not totally, aka myself,
Danica, yeah,
are not familiar exactly where that sits in the States, it is in between, it's right beside Illinois, which is not Illinois.
No one thought it was.
Oh, some people do. Okay. And Ohio. So I think somewhere on the top or the bottom there's Kentucky, but it's right there. So this is kind of important because Indianapolis is right on the border of Ohio. So Indiana and Ohio are side by side. That will come later on in the episode. That will come back and be more relevant.
Important.
Exactly. So, like I said, it was July 1993 when 32-year-old Roger Goodlett left his mother's house one night. After 48 hours without a word from him, his mother, Catherine...
Did he live with his mother?
He was they were very close. I couldn't find anywhere that he lived with her, but
every
they were
story
very
starts
close.
that way.
Yeah. So they were really close, and it was really out of character for him to not be in touch with her, which we can totally, get. Because if I didn't talk to my mom for like maybe 3 hours, she's like, "Are you alive?" Same with me. I'm like, "Are you alive? Did someone kill you?" Like if you ever, heaven forbid, are murdered and someone goes to your phone, like that's what they'll see. So that's
that'll
awesome.
be sus also.
Yeah, well, I mean, they'll be like, oh. So she, as a worried mother would, goes and tries to file a missing person report because it's been 48 hours. But the police say, oh, no, you need to wait 30 days. So we already know that the police can be a little... Well, what wordage should I use here?
Well, maybe don't use wordage that's too discriminatory because we might need them one day.
Yes, and as you guys will learn, my facial expressions usually divulge anything I'm thinking before, or if my hand doesn't give it away, then my face will.
And I'm just dead inside.
We switched. Yeah. So, like I said, to her surprise, they said, yo, lady, we know your kid's gone, but you need to wait. And
a month.
Exactly. And you think by the time someone's 32 years old, like, you know me pretty well. If I just stopped talking to you for 2 days, you would definitely know that something
Well, I would have anxiety for a couple of days that you were mad at me over something I did that I didn't realize. And then after that, I would be like, I wonder if Danica, something happened to her.
Well, obviously his family doesn't want to wait, just like I wouldn't wait either. So what do? They hire a private investigator. And this private investigator's name is Virgil Vandergriff.
Virgil is a fucking cool name for a private investigator.
That's my mom's cat's name.
Yes.
So,
but Virgil, that's a swanky name.
It is. So Virgil Vandergriff is a professional private investigator in Indianapolis, and he is a retired major crime investigator from the Marion County Sheriff's Department. So just weeks later, and already working with Roger's family, Virgil gets another call from the family of a man named Alan Broussard. And this is another man who is suddenly missing from the Indianapolis area. He communicated with Mary Wilson, who is another investigator with the Indianapolis Police Department. That fucking word is in almost every other sentence, so...
Indianapolis, Acropolis.
The two detectives began investigating, both convinced that these two crimes were related, because it was easy to see that there were a lot of similarities
like
between...
similarities, like identical similarities.
Yeah, the two missing men literally hung out at the same places. They were the same height, the same weight. They worked the same type of job, and they even dated the same guy. So these men were both from the gay community in Indianapolis, which is a very tight-knit community. Any communities that are, communities, these people are out. They're out together. They work together.
Especially the LGBTQ2S plus community, because I think especially back in the 90s for sure, it was... a lot of people weren't out yet. A lot of people were still closeted, and they were very tight-knit compared to even other communities.
So obviously, the community was kind of they're scared because this is not the first man to go missing. This is now publicly the second man in a very short period of time.
Yeah.
And when they searched their houses, there was nothing to indicate that there had been a struggle or anything. There was nothing at their houses. So they just simply vanished.
Well, and I don't know, also there was quite a bit of discrimination at that time, and I think it was probably let go that, okay, these guys are just grown-ups, they left home.
They ran away.
Yeah, they ran away.
They just ran away like all the other places. Maybe they were hitchhiking somewhere and they ran away. So they started putting up posters, as people do when they go missing, and tips started flooding in. So one tip that was actually pretty good and led them into, they didn't know it yet, but the right direction, was the night that Roger disappeared, someone saw him getting into a blue car with Ohio license plates. So like we said,
Ohio is right next to
Indianapolis. Okay. Indiana, Ohio, right on the border. Another tip led them into a darker part of town with some kind of like underground sex trafficking ring. But as promising as that sounded, it actually turned out to be a dead end. So some of the publishers from some of the local gay magazines actually let investigators know that there were other men that were missing from the community. So what does that usually tell everybody, and especially authorities?
I mean, that sounds like a serial killer to me.
Exactly. Ding, 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 ding. So they now thought that they had a serial killer on their hands. And as we know, serial killers try to target communities where they think that no one's going to notice or no one's going to care.
Or they're being discriminated against, so it's going to be just kind of swept under the rug because no one actually wants to discuss the uncomfortable notion that someone could be.
Yeah. So we know about that. I mean, locally in the 90s, 2000s, there was a big case, which we have not covered, but the case of the missing women in and around the downtown east side, which now we obviously know it was perpetrated by Robert Pickton, Willie Pickton. But they knew for a long time, and people were kind of, you have to trust your gut, like we always talk about. You have to trust your gut. People are going missing. Even people who are living a more transient lifestyle, it doesn't mean, obviously, yes, sometimes they will lose touch and they'll, kind of in and out, whatever. But
they still have their faithful that they keep in touch with. Like, even if they're not allowed to live at home or, they're having issues with substance abuse, whatever, people still know when these people are missing. It's just not as publicized, and it's easier to be swept under the rug, and nobody wants to watch a story about someone from the downtown east side that's missing until it's 40 people.
Which is crazy. So now in Indianapolis, there were now that they knew of 8 men missing since 1991, which that's a neon flag. So
hello.
Yeah. Police find the man who had a relationship with both Alan and Roger, as well as one of the other missing men. So obviously he's going to be the main suspect because
that guy was probably like, fuck.
Yeah, right, man. He got a broken picker, you know?
I bet he was pretty hot, though, if everyone's fucking him.
He probably was pretty hot. Yeah. So they're always really hot. A lot of gay men are always really, really good looking.
It's true.
Yeah. Anyway, they searched his home. They searched his home with cadaver dogs. They searched everything. And he was very, very
fuck, I didn't do anything.
Yeah, he was super, super cooperative.
I think that also has to be a little scary when you look at the amount of people that have been railroaded into crimes that they didn't do.
Oh, my gosh.
So can you imagine, just thinking, this could go one of two ways.
Yeah. Wow. So 3 months later, there were no new leads. They had the Ohio license plate, but how many people live in Ohio? Probably a fucking a lot. So, and it was a blue car, so they just, they're looking for a blue car. How you have to narrow it down. So there's no substantial leads that are getting them anything.
At this point, did they have a description of what the person driving the car looked like?
No, they had nothing. So, obviously people in the community and in these places are going to probably be a little more aware, start to pay a little more attention. But then a man came forward, and his name was Tony Harris, and he came forward with a very terrifying tale.
I'm having a deja vu moment right now.
Are you?
Yeah.
Did you record with someone else in this nice studio?
Maybe.
Well, the man, Tony Harris, actually has a recording. So I'm going to play it for you guys because hearing his account is actually
creepy.
It's very creepy, yeah. So hold on. Let's see. Let's get it.
A lot of stuff after this recording begins to...
Yeah, this is kind of what pushes them way in the right direction because this is a very, very big lead. So hold on. Let's go here.
We actually have some audio.
Okay, that's from another thing.
Led to another. Within 15 minutes, I'm in his car, going to what I've been told to be his employer's home in Hamilton County. The house was a very dusty place to be. Mannequins all over in different postures. I asked him about the mannequins. He told me that the owner didn't want to be alone.
I'm gonna get some mannequins.
I was standing in the pool. He began to drop hints, as to what he was into. He placed a hose around my neck. This was not an attack. This was asking, are you into this? He liked to be strangled, so he asked me to strangle him or to hold his throat, so I did. He fell unconscious down into the water. Within a minute, he came to, looks directly up at me, and tells me of the rush that he has, the exhilaration of the whole experience for him. He wanted to reciprocate with me. I allowed this. He got away with his hands on your neck. Once he starts with this process, you don't want him to stop. You want it to continue. He could bring on a sort of ecstasy. He told me what turned him on about it was seeing the eyes bulge out of the head, seeing the lips swell up and at times crack, the discoloration in the skin. He spoke as if he was in some sort of ecstasy or...
Yeah, for me, that wouldn't do it. The bulging of the eyes. Probably.
Well, I don't know.
Wouldn't get my rocks off, but
you don't know until you try it, really. That
seems like you're speaking from experience.
No, I have never tried that.
That's
truthfully.
Nice to know. Good.
However, I've heard that from a lot of people. Not that anyone's asked me to do it.
It hasn't come up in a whole lot of conversation in my life. But anyway, he went back with this guy.
I would have been fucking out with the mannequins. As soon as I saw the mannequins, I would have been like, I
don't know.
Yeah, you would have been intrigued by the mannequins.
No,
I would have been
honestly,
like,
mannequins even in the store freak me out. So imagine if you went back with this guy, for a good time, and he had all these mannequins. Obviously, if he's like, oh, they're not my mannequins, they're I'm just the caretaker.
I don't know. Even fucking still, I'd be out with the mannequins.
Yeah. So basically, Tony went there. They had some drinks. They did a little bit of cocaine, and they went for the swim. And you heard what happened. Obviously, it kind of one thing led to another.
Strangled him with a pool hose.
Yeah, the pool hose. So he actually, after he did it to, so this man said his name was Brian Smith, which is probably the fakest name I've ever heard. So I would
Very
be like,
generic.
Yeah. Brian Smith. Sorry to any of our listeners named Brian Smith.
I don't know, though, that names when you're having a sexual liaison that's like pretty random is going to really be important.
Yeah.
BS. Brian Smith, BS.
There we go. Gonna get a lot of BJs. Anyway, so he didn't get any BJs, I guess, because he was almost... Anyway, Brian Smith asked him after he put the hose around his neck, can I do it to you? And he pretty much said to him, like you heard in the recording, it's going to be the best orgasm you ever had in your life.
So I don't understand. Maybe someone can write in, like, are you actually having an orgasm while you're being strangled, or are you just being strangled?
Well, it's probably like the rush and the thrill is what leads you to the orgasm, is what I would believe.
It's supposed to be the best orgasm ever, so it must be, like, in conjunction.
Well, no, that's what I'm saying. It's probably like that's what's going to push you to having, like, oh my God, I'm going to die, and then, like, you know.
Yeah, but...
Well, in this case...
I'm going to have to do some more research.
Yeah, maybe you let us know next time. So he let him try it. Tony let Brian do it because he's like, okay, wow, that looked awesome.
I think if you get to that point, whatever.
Yeah.
He came back, so...
There you go.
But the mannequins
still kind of freaked out. But anyway, so he's like, okay, my turn. Brian was like, my turn. Turn around. So Tony said that he started to get afraid because this man was not letting go of him. So he, like anyone, like I would do, like if you see a bear, or unless you're my mom who has just mace right in her mid-center console of her car, you play like you pretend that you're passed out or you play dead or whatever, right? So Tony said that he did this, and when he came to... Apparently the look on Brian Smith's face was like, what the fuck?
Well, and we also have to say, Tony was actually 6'7".
Yeah,
so,
but good fucking thing because
yeah,
like I think that's what
he was
saved
probably
his...
standing in the deep end and like not even up to his waist. So Brian Smith was like, like,
yeah, well that's probably why he didn't try again.
Yeah.
So pretty much Tony says like he gets a little suspicious and he says like, is this what happened to this person and this person and this person? Because he knows that these people are missing. And obviously if you're going to have an encounter like this is probably not very common. I don't know what's going on in Indianapolis, but in this time, I mean the 90s was wild, but I don't know if it was this wild.
Oh yeah, it was.
Ooh. But he says right to him, I'm going to go to the police and I'm going to tell them about this. But he's probably like, oh, no, please don't go to the police because he's so tall. So obviously I think that that's kind of what saved him a little. So they used this information. The police were like, okay, that's probably what's been going on. Because if you can piece two and two together and this man's strangling people at this mansion.
Tony also didn't really have a really good attention to detail.
No.
I mean, he knew some of the...
So he knew that the driveway was really long and curvy, which is a good thing. And he knew that there was a pool, obviously.
Yeah.
And he said that he knew that there was the word farm somewhere in the estate's name. But again, he said that it was his employer's home. It wasn't even his home. So obviously if you're trying to throw someone off your case, you're going to be like, oh, no, I don't live here. It's just my mom's house. Or whatever, I've never used that one before. I've never done that. So they tried to set up a sting, and they pretty much got it so that, he could set it up and say, oh, hey, like, come and meet me. But Brian Smith never showed up. They don't know if maybe he knew, he used his intuition, and he didn't show up. But there were no leads. After that, again, he remembered the driveway, he remembered the farm, and that's pretty much it. So when Brian indicated that he lived in Ohio, because he told him, I just come into town for work. But my boss is out of town, so he's allowed me to use his house. Probably not to strangle and have sex with men in the pool.
But maybe.
I mean, I don't know. I didn't read the fine print.
So at this point, I'm pretty sure the FBI was also involved.
Well, this is what happens because they basically... When Ohio kind of comes into the picture, they remember that this guy had an Ohio license plate. So at this time now, they're like, okay, Ohio obviously has something to do with this. So they looked into Ohio, and they realized that these missing men in Indiana are just the tip of the iceberg. So between 1980 and 1990, which is 10 years, 9 men had been found off of Interstate 70. mostly tossed over, like kind of in like this, the brush area, but always by a body of water.
And they could they could never find any evidence.
They could never find evidence.
But they were all killed in the same manner.
Yeah, they were all killed in the same manner, and they all happened to be part of the LGBTQ plus community, 2+ community. So they obviously had very striking similarities, and all the victims were partly unclothed and, like we said, found near water.
And they had all died of strangulation.
They had all died of strangulation, and they were all from Indianapolis. So after realizing, 5 FBI profilers were sent to give a profile of this killer and what they thought that they would be looking for. So the profilers said that this man would be in his mid-40s, started in his early 30s. He would be married. He would be frustrated by his homosexual orientation and will not stop until he is stopped. They start looking for matching properties based on the survivor's recollection. So in Hamilton County, investigators found a similar property, and they think that it matches kind of what he was saying because it has farm in it, it has a big twisty driveway, and they can tell that there's a pool and all this stuff. And so they trace this house back to a respected local businessman named Herbert Baumeister. And obviously that's not enough because Herbert Baumeister is a respected businessman, like we said.
Married with children.
He's married. He has 2 kids.
Done very well for himself.
His father is a respected used to be a respected anesthesiologist before he passed away. And so nobody would sign a warrant because what evidence is there? Especially this man claims that he worked for the person that lived there. So there's not even,
yeah, it could have just been Herb's worker.
But then Tony is out at the bar one night, and he sees Brian. He sees him.
Brian Smith.
So he didn't see Tony because he kind of hid, and he asked a friend. He's like, can you go and follow that guy out to the parking lot and take down his license plate? So when he gave the license plate to police, it also led back to respected businessman Herbert Baumeister. So Baumeister is is it Baumeister? Is it Baumeister? Is it Baumeister?
I'm pretty sure it's Baumeister. It might be Baumeister.
Baumeister? Herbert?
But I don't think so because if you see a picture of Herbert.
Okay, I'm so excited for you guys to see pictures of Herbert.
Yeah.
So they showed Tony a picture of it's obviously Herbert Baumeister's driver's license, and Tony says, that's Brian. So Mom's going to go into some detail about Herbert.
Here we go.
Do you need this?
No, I'm good.
Okay, perfect.
So Herbert Richard Baumeister was born to successful parents, Elizabeth and Dr. Herbert Baumeister Sr., in April of 1947, April the 7th, so that makes him an Aries.
An Aries.
Phew. When we did the research about the serial killers that were born the most in what month? Was there a lot of Aries?
A lot. No, not really.
A lot of Sag.
Yeah. Which I'm surprised by. I might have dated a Sag or 2, and they probably were both serial killers.
So anyway. Herbert was the oldest of 4 children. And his parents moved when he was in elementary school to an affluent neighborhood of the Butler-Tarkington area of Indiana. He had a pretty unremarkable childhood. He was just pretty normal as a younger kid, except for he did really have a fascination with dead animals, which we know is part of
I wonder if he wet the bed.
Triad. Well, he probably did.
Lit fires.
So he was actually obsessed with urine from a young age also. So I don't know that he actually wet the bed, but he...
But he wanted everyone to wet his bed?
Well, he wanted to know what urine would taste like, what it would be like to pee on someone. So he definitely did have stuff about urine.
I've never been curious about that.
I think, I haven't either. When we were kids...
You think you had to think about it?
No, but when we were kids, we'd do funny stuff like, put a pee in a jar and make
when
that it's apple juice or whatever.
Remember when Dustin pissed in a thing and made David drink it.
Yeah,
and
so
he said it was Orange Crush.
That's the fucked up thing, is that some people have some...
Anyway, Herbert Baumeister, that kid...
So when he reached his teenage years, he was one of these kids that was like, when you see a picture, it will kind of make more sense. He was awkward. He was, you know, thin and white and kind of geeky, and he didn't really have... he had like a weird personality. So
yeah, he was a weird guy.
Like, he would say inappropriate weird shit to people, and he would play with dead animals on the road, and he never had friendship, so I think he was quite lonely. Mm-hmm. He actually put a dead crow on his teacher's desk.
Which is hilarious.
Yeah.
Just kidding. That's horrible. I was like,
yeah, it is.
Yeah, it's pretty funny. No.
And he also urinated on his teacher's desk.
I wonder if he got expelled.
So his parents were actually pretty affluent, and they had quite a bit of pull in the community.
Well, and his dad was a doctor, so
yeah,
he probably you have to go through like the medical part where you just learn that what's normal and what's not before your specialty.
It was very, very. It was becoming more and more apparent as he got older and older that he was just like
something was fucking up with Herbert.
Something was up with Herbert. So he was actually diagnosed at 17 years old with schizophrenia. And to our knowledge, he was never treated. Like, they got the diagnosis, and then they were like, okay, well, now
Herbert,
we know what's up with Herbert.
Live your best life and go piss on stuff and continue your weird thing with dead animals.
So he never still had any friends through high school. He tried to join the football team, but clearly when you see his photo, he didn't really fit in there
not
either.
Not a football teamer, no. He's not.
I don't know, like if he was pressured by his father or whatever, but
also with the cover-up thing of his mental illness, like maybe because you have to think, okay, this was in what, the 70s probably?
Yeah,
70s,
so he was
60s?
born in 1947, so
60s,
it would have been the 60s.
Whatever. You know,
the mid-60s.
But there was a very big stigma, which up until very recently, there was, I mean, now, like we've talked about, mental health there's more awareness around mental health.
And mental health is like, if you don't have your mental health going for you, you feel like you
if you
can't
break
even
your arm.
function.
If you break your arm, you don't just not have a cast and let it be broken.
Worse because it's like on the inside of your body. Yeah.
But like you get a cast for your broken arm.
But can you imagine, like, if you're diagnosed as a schizophrenic person, a person living with schizophrenia, then you're hearing the voices and everything else, which, I mean, I'm a little bit whatever about whether or not he was, because he was functioning. He was doing weird stuff, but it was, kind of like more sociopathic, not really. Yeah. So he wasn't doing like schizophrenic stuff, really.
No, he was doing psychopathic stuff. Like he was a murderer.
Definitely off.
Yeah.
So he did end up going to university. And he was in university. He just kept quitting university. He tried to go back 4 times, but he never actually graduated university.
University is not for everybody. I don't know.
So he had a series of jobs that basically his dad got him into. Like, his dad would be like, hey, want to hire my son? He's fucking great, but he's a little...
but he's really not. He might piss on your desk. Or...
But a friend had introduced him to a coworker had introduced him to a mutual acquaintance. So he actually got a girlfriend.
Juliana?
Yeah, Juliana. So he had a series of jobs. We'll talk about Juliana in a second. And he was still trying to fit in his jobs. Yeah. But he always, like, he was just kind of like an outcasty nerd. So he would always be looking up to, like, the higher-ups, and they would use him to, like, okay, you know, like be a coffee runner or do whatever. But he did
Herb. Send Weird Herb to get coffee. I don't even know if I would trust him around my coffee.
If you like to drink piss.
Does your coffee taste like urine?
Yeah. This apple juice. But
does apple juice taste like urine?
I don't know. I never drank pee before yet.
I don't know with your...
Yet? Yeah, I was waiting for you to catch on to that. So
baby brain.
So he got progressively weirder. So one time
I wouldn't even think was possible.
One time he was supposed to get a ride for all of his bosses to go to a Halloween party, and it was like bosses and wives and like important people in the company he was working at. So he hired a hearse,
but not just any hearse.
A hearse with flashing lights to drive them all to the Halloween
Tommy should
party,
get a hearse with
which I
flashing
think
lights.
is fucking cool.
To a Halloween party, I think
think
maybe
it's
is not as red
appropriate,
flaggish. Yeah. But
Another thing he did, well, he got a really good job actually at the motor vehicle branch, and one time he sent a guy dressed in drag to go to work for him for no apparent reason.
which in itself isn't really, I mean, it's kind of funny and like, haha. But then when you look later of what he's suspected of doing, it's like, oh, okay, weird.
Yeah, I mean,
Herb.
in retrospect, Herb
Yeah.
was pretty, I mean, Herb kind of showed a lot of signs.
Yeah, everyone's just like, don't look at her.
So, like
Don't
we
look at her.
said, in 1971, somehow, I guess there's somebody for everybody in the world.
Yes.
Somehow he managed to marry college graduate Juliana Sater, whom he met through a mutual friend, as I said.
Mm-hmm.
She was actually attracted to him. He was, I guess...
Okay, beauty is in the eye of the beholder.
But, I mean, he wasn't, like, hideous. He had nice eyes.
He has psycho eyes.
Well, I don't know. You have to see
you
a
know what,
couple
though?
pictures.
I've seen your type sometimes, so.
Yeah, well. So she was attracted to him, and they also shared similar goals, like to be entrepreneurial and have their own business.
Yeah.
They ended up having 3 children. Oh, but one important part is 6 months after they were married, Herb's dad actually sent him to a mental institution for 2 months.
That would give me a complex. Like, you just got married, and now
Well,
your husband.
I can't believe that your husband, that you stayed, well, I guess I can believe it, but like, yeah. Right after they got married. We're not
Can you
talking
believe
about
it?
that right now. Anyway, Julie stayed with Herb, and she became a stay-at-home mom. And he eventually pissed on his boss's desk.
Surprise, Herb.
Branch of motor vehicles. And he went through a series of odd jobs until 1988. So that's quite a stretch. Like 1971 to 1988, it was like a pretty unstable financial situation.
Yeah.
But Herb's about to fucking
Hit
have
it
a good
big.
idea.
Yep.
So he was always said to be like pretty controlling over his wife. Like they would have ideas together and whatever, but it always came down to what he said. Like he was...
We all know someone like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's their idea, but.
So he was working at a thrift store, and he was making basically shit wages. So he was seeing like how many families had the need for affordable things to buy and couldn't afford to clothe all their children and blah, blah, blah. So he opened...
He saw a little niche
he saw
in that
a
market.
niche.
Yeah.
And he opened a...
One thing about Herb is he is entrepreneurial.
He is, yeah. And he has some mannequins laying around, so that's probably where he got them.
That's probably why, yeah.
So he opened a community thrift store called Save-A-Lot Thrift. And the shop ended up being very, very successful. And before long, they had 2 branches of it.
Perfect, yeah.
So it was so successful. Within 3 years, by 1991, which is pretty fast, they were able to buy an 18-acre estate with 4 bedrooms. Oh, and an indoor swimming pool, riding stables, and all that kind of stuff. And it was called Fox's Hollow.
Fox Hollow Farm. Oh.
Yeah, so
Where?
it's all coming together now. It was a rural estate, and it was in the fashionable Westfield area. To onlookers, it looked like they were living the American dream, but anyone that got close realized, like, the house was a bit of a hoard. It was pretty dusty. Those 2 were always fighting.
She was actually not home a whole lot. She would go to their lake house.
So she would often take the kids to his mom's house, actually.
Yeah,
in,
on
Wawawasi Lake.
That was really easy for me to say. We know
Yeah,
how.
because you got all stumped over Indianapolis.
Did you say it properly?
Wawasi?
No,
Indianapolis. No, I was making fun of you.
Oh.
So she would go often alone. I think basically she fucking hated his guts but felt trapped. Like
100%.
really.
Yeah. Because they had all this stuff together.
He was a dickhead, and he was always...
He was very distant.
out.
He was a distant father and a distant husband.
And
they only had sex 6 times in their whole marriage.
They had sex 6 times in 25 years.
And they have 3 kids.
So 3 of those times she swallowed. Anyway, Keeping it appropriate as usual.
This episode was brought to you by Sense Dog Dry Shampoo. It is the easiest way to make your dog smell good. You just sprinkle a little bit on. They have 3 different scents. You sprinkle a little bit on, you rub it in, and bam, your dog doesn't smell like shit anymore.
And it comes with this actually really cool glove that spreads it throughout the dog.
These are the sifter packs like we've talked about before. This is the cedarwood, this is the Zen lavender, and this is the which one? Purifying peppermint. So my favorite of these 3 is the Zen lavender. If you guys don't want to commit to a whole pack, they also sell the sample packs. And
the sample packs actually go pretty far too. Like you'll get a good feel about what it's like from the sample pack.
Yeah, Mom keeps one in her car just in case she's going on a hot date and has greasy hair, because that apparently happens to her a lot. Another thing they do have is paw balm. So really good for the winter if you have a dog that is walking a lot.
Well, and there's a lot of salt and stuff on the roads. Like I have a 100-pound German Shepherd, as we all know, and I used the paw balm a lot last winter. It was good. Yeah.
Perfect. It's all natural and organic, and you can purchase it and get 10% off with a code at firstsense.ca, and it is Murder with My Mother, MWMM10 at checkout for 10% off. So, yeah.
So go get some.
Go get some dog dry shampoo. If you don't have a dog, buy some for someone that does. Another cool thing is the Zen lavender is really good for dogs with anxiety. Kind of helps them calm down a little bit. So, yeah.
So that is in a nutshell. And Herb was always going out at night. And
I wonder if Rick is a serial killer.
I don't know.
Probably.
But he could be.
He could be. Anyway, so all
of this shit fits together, like really, especially you got the FBI and they're like, you know.
Well, and he fits the profile to a T. Now they've seen him. They have his house, they have his license plate, they have his blue car, they have all of it. So they questioned him, and he remained super calm. But the investigator, Tom Green, he said that the pulse in his neck, like his carotid artery, was like throbbing out of his. Like he looked cool, calm, and collected, but he could feel that he was like not actually doing well underneath. So they tried to get a search warrant, but for some reason the police in that jurisdiction would not give them the search warrant.
Well, Herb comes from a pretty powerful background.
Exactly. And it was only 3 months later that the police caught wind that Julie was divorcing Herb. So when they first went there to the house, Herb and Julie both pretty much, because they asked, can we search your property? And they said, no, of course not. Why would you?
Warrant, you cannot.
No, you can't. Yeah. And Julie was like, no. So Julie now filing for divorce 3 months after, and police actually tried to get her. They went to the house and got her alone, and they told her that they were investigating homosexual homicides, which she was like, what? Like, what is that? Like, okay, Julie, you had sex literally 6 times in your long ass marriage. You know that your husband, something is different with him, right? So she still refused to let them in because she was like, no. But she did call her legal advisor, and her legal advisor, pretty much she said to him, she's like, look, they told me they're investigating homosexual homicides. I'm not really sure what that means, but between you and I, a couple months ago, my son, Eric, came in the house and he had a skull.
A human skull.
A human skull.
Eric. Yeah.
Yeah, Eric. Fucking Eric found a human skull in the yard and brought it in and was like, Mom, like, I found this outside. And she lost it. She was like, oh my God. You know, obviously, like, if Kierce came in with a human skull, I would be like, except Kierce came home with a different kind of skull and Carlos was like, let's boil it and get all this stuff. I was like, that's disgusting. Anyway, wasn't human, or else I would have been like, I hit?
Yeah.
So she asked Herb. She's like, oh my God, Eric found this skeleton. And he was like really cool about it. And he was like, oh, that's just my dad's old.
He said he found it in the barn.
Yeah.
And he buried it because he didn't know it was like the medical.
Yeah, it was his dad's medical thing. But why would you? There's a lot of holes in that story, obviously.
Julie seems like she was in a bit of a river in Egypt.
Yeah, she was a little bit in denial. So, but anyway, like I said, she wanted to keep this between her and her legal
Attorney.
advisor, right? So they didn't tell this to police. But police didn't have a warrant, obviously. But what they did is they searched because they thought, okay, if there's people buried there, and if any of them are, if it's Roger or Alan, and it's quite new, we can search with something called FLU. It's forward-looking infrared.
It's probably...
It's heat-sensing equipment, right? So
you can
again,
see
this was the
disturbances
90s.
in the ground.
Yeah. So on June 24th, 1996, finally, Julie wants to talk to police because Herb had their son Eric and took him to the Wawawasi and would not bring him back. And she was kind of worried because he had been having like mood swings and just being very erratic. So behaving very erratically. And when you have someone's child with you and you're behaving that way, that's very worrisome. So finally, kind of as a tactic, she let authorities on her property. And let's just say there was a couple times where police looked over at Julie and she said, oh, there was a missing pair of handcuffs from the house. They find an arm and it has handcuffs on it. And she apparently looked like she was about to faint. So they found a lot of bones and it looked to be about 11 bodies in their yard. But they didn't find hardly any skulls. So that kind of tells me that, Herb was doing something with the skulls, but probably pissing in them and weird, their urinals or something. So right away, they wrote a petition for emergency custody of Eric. So the police went to Wawasee Lake, picked up Eric, but they were like, see you later, Herb. Like, they didn't do anything to Herb. They didn't want him to catch wind of what was going on. But as word got out, and almost 3 years after Alan and Roger went missing, Herb Baumeister is finally named on, publicly, he's named. So, but they still didn't arrest him. They still did not arrest him. So at this time, Julie checked her calendar and let the police know that it coincided every time she was away at the lake with the kids. That's when someone went missing, and that's when someone murdered was
found. And it also coincided as well with all of the bodies that they had been finding on the highway.
Yes. So they still, though, after that, they still held out on arresting Herb. So 4 days after the digging began on Fox Hollow Farms, Herb's brother received a call from Herb asking for money to be sent to him, and he said he was in Michigan, right by the Canadian border. So, surprise, surprise, the police still didn't do anything. They still didn't. So, you know what they said in one of the interviews I watched? Like, well, in hindsight, we probably should have had a tail on him. In hindsight, yeah, you probably should have. So, pretty much they kind of came to the conclusion that the year that they moved into Fox Hollow Farms, that's when all of the bodies stopped
appearing on the I-70.
Because Herbert got really confident, and obviously he's like, well, no one's catching me after 10 years. Why don't I just throw them in my own yard?
Well, and then, he also, they figure that that's the reason he bought that acreage is because there was a lot of empty ground for him to be able to do that. So they get a phone call from an Ohio man after this man saw Herb's picture on the news, and this man said, in 1983, I saw Michael Riley, my friend, who went missing and was later found dead in a stream on the side of I-70. They saw him leaving with Herb that night. So, but still, the police did not arrest him. They could have even said, watch Canadian authorities, this person might try to cross the border because we know he's in Michigan. He now has funds. He's probably going to try to cross into Canada. But no, nothing. Still not notified. But on July the 3rd, 1996, Herb Baumeister was found in his car, dead by suicide, a gunshot to the head, in Pinery Provincial Park in Grand Bend, Ontario. So, if you guys are wondering, there's no trial, there's no nothing. Basically, he killed himself and he took everything with him. And he left a suicide note that had no
Nothing.
It had nothing except for he was ashamed of his financial situation.
His marriage.
Failed marriage.
And that's pretty much it.
Yeah.
But it's funny because the day before he killed himself, not funny, but, haha. Ironic because he was sleeping in his vehicle and a policewoman went up to his car. He was still very much alive, took down his name, just to be like, okay, well, you're sleeping in your car, but this is a little suspicious, but took down his name, took down his license plate. But if they had alerted the Canadian authorities, they could have, if they put his name in there, it would have came up with a red flag and he could have been apprehended. No, yeah, probably not. So bone fragments and teeth were both recovered from the site, and it was believed that they belonged to a total of 11 men. However, only 8 of the men were actually identified. They were 34-year-old Roger Goodlett, Stephen Hale, Richard Hamilton, Manuel Resendez, Michael Kieran, Johnny Bayer, Alan Broussard, and Jeff Jones. But the total number of suspected victims is actually 21. And because no one will ever know, because he took all those secrets with him when he died. So
very selfish, Herb.
So that was the case of the I-70 strangler. They have no other name for him, but that's came to light afterwards. So Herb Baumeister, the creepy urine guy.
I really, we're going to post some good photos on our socials, and you guys will see, like, he's definitely a weird dude.
He is, and the mannequins, this whole case just is like, oh my God, like,
I really hope that we did well with our recording and that you guys actually watch it, and we will be coming back to you next month with a case that we haven't chosen yet. So like we always say, let us know. You got something fucked up and crazy, let us know.
You want to hear us talk about it, let us know. So yeah, until next time, this has been Murder with My Mother, the true crime podcast where I talk murder with my mother.
See you later. See you later.
Bye, guys.